because we saw the failures of Occupy and Tea Party and so many other political groups that came together over issues really have no political change effect out of those events. So I want to share two stories of people coming together to actually make real changes, and they're both from my community, the veteran community. And the first one is actually from here in Portland. Back in 1932, a guy named Walter Waters, during the height of the Great Depression, you know, he lost everything, and he wanted to go get money from the government because the government owed him money. Back in 24, I think it was, the government passed a resolution saying that if you served in World War I, whether at home or overseas, you'd be given basically $1 a day, up to $500. But this money wasn't going to be paid out until 1945. And this is the middle of the Great Depression. Everyone's poor. So the veterans in particular knew they were owed money, and they needed to go fight for it. So Walter Waters, a guy from Oregon who was in Portland, decided to speak up about this issue. And he went to an American Legion Hall and said, we need to march on Washington, D.C. and get this money back. And that's exactly what he did. 200 guys left, 200 veterans left Portland from the train station down there and went to Washington, D.C.
Hey man,
and when they arrived, they were, I think, 6,000 of them. The message spread across the country like wildfire.
Yeah.
By June, just months after he had had his initial conversation about walking to Washington, D.C. from Portland, there were 17,000 veterans there. They overwhelmed the state police. They had to call in the Army, and eventually, unfortunately, the Army was called in to disperse their camps. But they called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force, and this movement was so powerful, it resonated so heavily with people that people came from all over the country and organized and took trains out. They found any way they could to go to Washington, D.C. because of one guy's speech here in Portland. So there's some power there. And eventually when they ran out of Washington, D.C., the images that resulted of that led to FDR being elected. A lot of newspapers back at the time contributed the mistreatment of veterans by the U.S. Army in Washington, D.C. at the time to a massive change in politics in this country. And that eventually led to things like the GI Bill of Rights that we have today and so many other benefits. And that all started from one guy here in Portland, Walter Waters. Woo! Another quick story. Back in 1967, the height of the Vietnam War was raging. There was a march on Washington, D.C. of almost 400,000 peaceful protesters. And in that march was 6 veterans that just came back from Vietnam. And those 6 veterans wrote on a banner, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. They didn't have any intentions at the time of making it an organization. They didn't have any idea of what they wanted to do. They just wanted to identify themselves as veterans and march in this peaceful protest to show their opposition to the war. By 1970, Vietnam Veterans Against the War had 3,000 members, and by 1972, it was 10,000 members, and it just kept growing. And today it's still an active group. And that all started from 6 guys in a rally who wrote Vietnam Veterans Against the War. It became a massive national organization and directly contributed to the end of the war in Vietnam. So small events like this, it seems like it's really hard to be, here in the crowd and think that what you're doing is significant. But it is. It does have a huge effect. And we shouldn't forget that. We shouldn't let naysayers who say that what we're doing is useless or it's ineffective. These things are important. And when we want to escalate our tactics to something else to get more attention, if that needs to be done, then we need to have a strong foundation. We need to have a lot of people who say that what we're doing is important. So when people talk about, armed marches on Washington, D.C. or storming the Capitol or whatever it is they think is going to work to get change they want to see, we need massive popular support first. And the way to do that is to have rallies like this. And so I really appreciate all of you coming. I was really kind of afraid, truth be told, on the fighting meeting on Saturday, I was the only guy there. So one person came late, but I appreciate all of you being here from the bottom of my heart. And there's a sign-up list here if you want to